The Director of Programs, Ms. Anna Kintiani, and our host, the Mayor, His Worship, the Mayor of Zululand, the Reverend Tracy Butelezi, and all the distinguished guests, all the captains of our industry present. I'm very pleased that as I looked around in this room, that the room is filled as much as COVID will allow, with carefully selected entrepreneurs, investors, and business-like people. Each of you, ladies and gentlemen, has the potential to engage a powerful partnership with the district municipality of Zululand. And many of you already have, I'm pleased to see, friends among us, both old and new, as well as individuals who will undoubtedly become our friends as we work together to grow the strength of Zululand. I would like to say a special word of thanks to the President this morning of the Special Advisor to the Minister of Tourism, Mr. Mpumuzi Mjagazi, and to the Chief Operations Officer of African Habitat Conservancy, who has addressed us, Mr. Jeffrey van Staden. And I also acknowledge Parliament's Chairperson of the Standing Committee of Public Accounts, the Honorable Mr. Nkulego Semo, members of the Royal Family present, Kosoma Vunja, and I greet the Chairperson of the Amazulu Club, Mr. Sandy Nzumu, who is a very young student doing his MBA degree at the School of Business in Cape Town, was responsible for my invitation to address a meeting at the university. Also welcome the Group Chief Executive of Itala, Ms. Pearl Bengu, and the Chairperson of Edison Group, Mr. Vivian Reddy, the Group Executive of Sustainability and Stakeholder Engagement of Boxer, Superstores, as well as the Managing Director, Mr. Marek Masojada, the Chief Executive Officer of Trade and Investment, KZN, Ms. Neville Machis, and the Chairperson of Process Leto, Mr. Muzi Ndombela, and because of his roots, whom I call my homeboy. I've been given the task of speaking to you, ladies and gentlemen, this morning about investment opportunities in Zululand district. However, I know that His Worship has done that better than I could have done, and was well equipped to do that in the manner in which he did so. I would therefore like to change my topic, and I think my age gives me the prerogative to answer the two questions: why Zululand? And the second one, why this leadership? As you no doubt know, I have lived in Zululand all my life, having grown up at the palace of my uncle, King Solomon Ladini Zulu, my mother's brother. In 1953, I took up my hereditary position as Inkosi of the Butelezi clan and began administering the day-to-day matters of my people, including trying both criminal and civil cases. In the 70s, I began administering the governance of the KwaZulu, what was the parting state, homeland, on the instruction of my leader and mentor, it was Albert Gutuli, and my leader, Oliver Tambo, who was the leader of our movement, mission in exile. So for 18 years, I led the government, of course, as all of you know, and in 1994, when the election had asked IFE to govern KwaZulu-Natal, I led the party and then administered the province for the first 10 years of democracy. And what I'm going to say has nothing to do with elections. I'm just mentioning the historic fact that there was not a whiff of corruption for 10 years. We had Dr. Frank Zalosa, Dr. Ben Gubani, Dr. Buchali. Nothing, no, not a whiff. So apart from this, I've served, of course, under His Majesty, my first cousin, King Cyprian Beguzulu, Young Azizula Solomon, and under His Majesty King Gudrun Zolichi Beguzulu, as their traditional Prime Minister, and to the nation. Now, in all these roles, I've worked to secure the development of Zululand and the greater KwaZulu-Natal. My concern for our country's economy led me openly to disagree with my leaders in the African National Congress, of which I was a member, who began calling for international economic sanctions against South Africa and disinvestment. It was this as well, of course, as my rejection of an armed struggle that led to the most painful chapter of my life. The stand I took then for our economy and our people made me the target of more than a decade of vilification. But, ladies and gentlemen, that is how I firmly believed and still believe in the importance of securing economic freedom. Because all of you are my witnesses that although we've achieved political freedom, but we're very far from achieving economic freedom. As Chief Minister of KwaZulu, I also served as Minister of Economic Development in KwaZulu, and that enabled me to found the KwaZulu Finance and Investment Corporation. And my mentor was Bishop Alpheus Zulu. After he retired as Diocese Bishop of the Diocese of Zululand, whom I personally joined me in that battle as chairperson of the corporation. He left a great mark. Out of this emerged the Taliban, which gave Black South Africans access to loans and seed capital, which traditional financial institutions simply would not do because our people are poor, they couldn't get loans, they were not given loans, they couldn't service loans. And that's the reason why I was motivated to found it. In fact, the name Itala came from Bishop Zulu's lips. He would compare me at that time in seeking economic freedom to my people, for my people rather, even at the height of apartheid, as similar to what Nehemiah Dinango did in the Bible when he carried weapons on the one hand, fighting for the freedom of his people, and with the other hand, he built the wall of Jerusalem. He became unpopular too, Bishop, even with some of his peers, for we shared the same vision. And that is the reason why he supported me. In fact, I remember that made him unpopular. When I was asked by Mr. Oliver Tambo to attend a conference in London in 1979, the bishop was part of that delegation. In fact, Mr. Tambo asked him to chair that meeting between the delegation of the ANC and the delegation of of the IFP, of Inkatha, as it was now, National Council of Liberation Movement. Bishop Zulu supported my international travels when I was seeking investments all over the world. And my campaign against sanctions in favor of investment in South Africa, even at the height of the ANC's campaign, which was organizing my organization for international sanctions and disinvestment. In fact, it tarnished even the name of Bishop Zulu. For he was at one time one of the deputy presidents of the World Council of Churches. And you know that the World Council of Churches also was persuaded by our mission in exile to actually support economic sanctions and disinvestment against South Africa. I looked at the international market to attract investment into KwaZulu. I visited heads of state. I was not a head of state, but somehow, the Lord was good to me. Like the British Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, who in fact visited me in London, at the Holiday Inn, visiting me. While I was Prime Minister, I interacted with the United States presidents, President Jimmy Carter, President Reagan, President Bush, in Germany with Chancellor Kohl, and Holland's Prime Minister Delors, and convinced them not to impose economic sanctions against South Africa. Large industries such as General Motors, multinational companies, which are one of the very biggest employers in South Africa, left and returned in 1994. But many of those companies did not return to South Africa, which was actually the origin of the biggest problem we're facing in the country: unemployment, joblessness. The first conversation with an American president that I had in the Oval Office in Washington was on proposals which had at that time been made by a black pastor at the Detroit General Motors annual conference. The American investors were being urged, of course, to leave. Pastor Leon proposed that no, they mustn't leave, they must remain in South Africa and do the right things, such as ignoring iniquitous laws like job preservation and promoting black workers in the American multinational companies. At that time, the definition of the industrial workers did not include blacks. That is why with Professor Slammer, that was then the University of Natal, I started the Institute for Black Workers here in Durban. And I was the chancellor of that institute, for which the biggest trade union in the free world, AFL-CIO, actually awarded me jointly with Dr. Neil Argett, who was murdered by the apartheid regime, the George Meany Human Rights Award. Now, when I entered the office of the president, he had a piece of paper in his hand, and he was asking me, because there had just been a general meeting of the company of General Motors in Detroit, and this pastor had come out with what were then called the Leon Sullivan Principles, which I've already mentioned. So, ladies and gentlemen, looking to rapidly growing economies, I established trade relations with Taiwan and opened a Taiwanese trade office in KwaZulu. I also had an office in Taipei before 94. I also then linked rather all my friendships with industrialists and secured funding for many projects. And through the Anglo-American and De Beers Chairperson Fund, we built the Mangosuthu University of Technology to equip black youth with vocational skills so that they could participate in the workforce. That was through my friend, of course, Mr. Harry Oppenheimer. Now and then, my late wife Irene and I were invited by him and his wife Bridget for dinner at Brandhurst. And we'd have dinner, and then after dinner, men would go to one corner and women would go to other corner. And men would start puffing their cigars and drinking whiskey, and then we'd talk politics. And sometimes he thought I was too hard on Mr. Forster, because he was a liberal himself. But even then, he said to me, I must remember that Mr. Forster must carry his people with him. I'm too hard in the demands that I was making as an activist of the ANC. Then, with my late cousin, King Cyprian and Amakosi, Chimudi, we visited the University of Zululand. It was just consisting of hutments, some hutments that were at the bluff here, which were used as lecture halls. We support, at that time, of course, even my movement, ANC, was totally against what they called bush colleges and so on. In fact, I wanted my son to study at the University, fourth year, my alma mater. And he was told, no, he's a Zulu, he must go to the University of Zululand. Which helped me very much. But with the king and our courses, we supported the so-called Bush College, to the extent that later the university appointed me, the council appointed me 3 times as chancellor for 7 years each time. So I was the chancellor for 21 years at that university. And I had a smile to myself when His Excellency Mrs. Zuma and others celebrated for the position of Chancellor, when I remember the debate on the Bush College. We established training colleges for teachers and nurses. We formed partnership with faith-based organizations like the Divine Life Society in Durban, an educational trust like the local trust in Durban. I had a great partnership with Swamiji Sarhajananda of the Divine Life Society in Durban. We built many schools, because after the uprising in Soweto in 1976, when our children there were shot with guns by the police, and they answered with stones. At that time, I don't know whether my movement at this external mission thought they were being bypassed by young people. Then they came out with the slogan, "Liberation now, education later," they said. I countered that with education for liberation. And that's how all these good people helped me to raise money to build classrooms and all that I was able to do at that time. So as I knew that much of KwaZulu's wealth was in natural resources, and I established South Africa's first Department of Nature Conservation, Mr. Van Staden, and ensured that our wildlife parks and reserves were all supported. Because I've been a conservationist all my life, in fact. When the young Ian Player, Nick Steele, and others started, darting, the rhinos, when the first movement of rhinos through these darts I was present with them, and very often they asked me to talk Tamakosi to leave a strip of land between the reserves and African areas of Tusue and follows the game reserve. And twice, Ms. Van Staden, I was awarded Wildlife Awards in Germany for conservation. In fact, my great friendship with Salvador for the Post was not based on politics. It was because, he was a great conservationist. And then it was actually through him that I was able to get the warm reception from Mrs. Thatcher, and also my friendship with His Royal Highness Prince Charles. So all these interventions bore good fruit. We reap their harvest for all the people of KwaZulu. Some companies came to Pinetown here through actually my appeal. I've been accused of harking back to apartheid when I say that families in KwaZulu at that time were better off than they are now when it comes to food security. But this is a simple truth. It was not about the government that fed our people. It was our people. For some reason, I think Pastor Jomo, Apostle Jomo, they must have thought that we're going to have Moses too, who is going to shout to the Lord and man is going to rain on us. Because of the 94, when I traveled through KwaZulu and Eastern Cape, I found that our people, because in summer, when you travel through the Eastern Cape, KwaZulu, all the rural areas, it would be green. People who had a subsistence economy at that time. Our people didn't have to beg for food, at that time. I remember during Des Moines, where they joked because there was that big Des Moines and we said that the pumpkins were washed away, but people who lived later were able to pick up the pumpkins to eat. So when I look at our people today, throughout South Africa, I see the depth of poverty and hunger that plagues us. It really breaks my heart at my age. How did we become independent people that we are today? Holding the line on government handouts. Having more than 70 million people now dependent on government grants. When we pride ourselves of being a development state, we're not a welfare state, but we're more of a welfare state than a development economy. Why do our people think that government is able to supply all their needs? Or even the government, or even that government is willing? The truth, ladies and gentlemen, is in dire straits, as all of you know. I'm not making a revelation now. Government does not have a handle on the situation. They don't have a handle on the situation. We have slipped down to junk status and are borrowing money simply to service the debts. Today, we talk about unemployment. His Worship the Mayor spoke about it, we've all mentioned it. Our children go to universities, they qualify, they have no jobs, and yet we borrowed. Yes, COVID has, of course, devastated us, but it's not true that it was COVID only that has destroyed our economy. Our country was mismanaged. Our economy was mismanaged. This country's economy was better than any economy on the continent. We're the leading economy. But we're bypassed by Nigeria, we're bypassed by Egypt. Since then, you see, I'll tell you a secret. We in our movement, in the ANC, we believed in nationalization. You know, even I believe in nationalization. Even my neighbor believed in nationalization. He only had a conversion when he became in charge of South Africa, because he needed jobs for people. But at the time, in African tendency is to admire nationalization. Let me tell you a secret. I had 2 trips to Tanzania to sit at the feet of the master, who was His Excellency Dr. Julius Nyerere, who was a guru on African socialism, Ujamaa. But at the time when I visited him, clearly it reflected, he had some thoughts about it. He gave me his book, 10 Years After Arusha, and he actually commented negatively even about some of the Ujamaa villages after he had sent people out to show me. And then I'll tell you a story that's very interesting too. Then, when President Nyerere came to South Africa to pay a state visit, in the itinerary he said must include a visit to my office as Minister of Home Affairs. And in chatting with him, he told me a very interesting story. He said that in 1980, when Dr. Mugabe, my contemporary at the University of Fort Hare, he said to Mugabe, because the economy of Rhodesia, which Zimbabwe was then, was second only to ours. It was strong. Nyerere said, he said to him, we have inherited the jewel. Please don't do what I did in Tanzania. Don't destroy it. But you see, now in our country, sadly, you must not mistake me and say I'm company for the IFP. I'm not. I'm speaking as a patriot of this country. You see, in our country, unfortunately, our movement, the ruling party, has a coalition with the South African Communist Party, and the leaders of our trade union, COSATU, many of them are communists, they believe in Marxism, they don't believe in the free market. When Mr. Chaumbegi became our president, he then came out with the policy of GEAR, which was an acronym for Growth, Employment, and Redistribution. I went to the podium in Parliament, and Apostle Jomo, I compared that to ANC, to the experience of Saul when he went to Damascus. I compared it to that. I was very happy. But what happened? Immediately, the partners of the ruling party, the Communist Party, and they threatened Mr. Mbeki that they are going to roll mass action. And then, of course, he froze. Because of the partnership in the voting, he needs their votes. So, when they sneeze, therefore, the ruling party catches the cold. After that, there were other experiences. There was Asgisa and so on, and other things which were experimented on. And even now, I don't really want to be accused of campaigning Honorable Sono. But you know, a very prominent party which is bigger than ours, not necessarily the ruling party. Then he went to Zimbabwe to admiring Mr. Mugabe. Mr. admirer of Mr. Mugabe. So when President Mnangagwa now is trying to compensate the farmers that they dispossessed, he called him a traitor. He accused him of being a traitor. He was admirer of Chavez in Venezuela. And you know what happened to Venezuela. Well, in big trouble, which is self-inflicted, in fact. So recently, when a terrible experience in Zulu-Natal, as was mentioned, was devastated by the looting and destruction. There was struck through sympathy for former president's arrest in July. Our people were dragged into a political war, if I may call it. And that desperate need was used to incite a civil uprising in the country. Billions of rands have been lost to our country's economy. Business and shops have simply closed. And many may never open again. Livelihoods have been lost, as well as lives. And our people were left desperately hungry. In the midst of this, I was deeply encouraged to see citizens standing together, as my mayor mentioned, together in Ulundi to restore law and order and protect businesses and homes. And I traveled during the night, on a cold night, that more than 9 stations around Ulundi, and I visited each one of them to encourage them to do what they were doing to protect businesses in Ulundi. Then the following day after the looting, people from Melbourne, people from Shashawa, people from, there was a snaking queue similar to the election queues of people who had come from other places to shop. I had to phone President Ramaphosa because about midday, 1 o'clock, I got very worried because I could see only one shop was open even then in Ulundi. I said, we must back up, the police must be backed up because I fear that if these people are not served, they'll loot. So they opened 2 or 3 other shops, then all the people were served. I'm talking about what happened in the economy in our country and why we need investment. And I was very encouraged by that action. Here in Phoenix, I got emails from some Indian citizens whom I don't even know, asking me whether I can appeal to the president to get them more because they wanted to protect their businesses. When I made a statement encouraging people in Phoenix, admiring them for doing that, then certain employees of some of our ministers posted on social media dead bodies of African people, and they posted my statement. In other words, say that I admired the Indians for killing Africans. I really thank the generous people because their generosity astonished me. And the swift response by farmers, by philanthropists, and large businesses who offered food parcels and material assistance to families in dire need. The contribution, of course, of the gifts of the givers has been a shining example. Indeed, there are many who deserve to be mentioned, but this morning I must, in particular, thank Boxer Superstores because even before these devastating riots, they've been at the forefront of providing assistance to vulnerable communities. Boxer Superstores works in partnership with the Zululand district municipality and is a regular supplier of food parcels and goods to those in need. Having said all this, ladies and gentlemen, let me return to the question of why Zululand and why this leadership. Zululand has a triflex that few investors could resist. It has tremendous natural resources, a track record of successful development, as we have heard already, and a distinct government that is honest, that is transparent, and that is accountable, as you heard from the mayor's talk. If I said anything more, I know that I'll be accused that during the local government elections, the mayor of Zululand brought Buthelezi to come and campaign during the camp workshops. I thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Sowalisa, for the speech that you have given, also connecting the history of where we come from to how we can get to the destination that is planned. And again, the wisdom of taking us back to history so that we can acknowledge the legacy that we celebrate today and how to avoid pitfalls going forward. Siyabonga kakhulu Shane, asimshayele ihlombe Makeba. Siyabonga. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm now going to invite the district's mayor together with a representative from Babanango Game Reserve for the official signing of the Memorandum of Understanding. And as soon as we are done with that item, we will then have brunch served. So, Shannon, together with Mr. Van Staden, will sign the memorandum. Yes, thank you. Okay, what we see happening now, ladies and gentlemen, we are witnessing the signing of this agreement between the Zululand District Municipality as well as the African Habitats Conservancy, in short, Babanango Game Reserve, mutually agreeing and understanding the importance of the significant role that both entities play in contributing to the socio-economic and tourism infrastructure development of the Zululand district municipality. Part of it also is underpinning the sharing of a common vision and thereby serve the same cause through the interlinking the objectives as well as the functions, and also respect the value each provides and the mutual support which is necessary for the achievement of their respective goals and the fulfillment of their shared vision. And also this is to formalize that they'll be working together on reduction of unemployment and further enhance tourism infrastructural projects. And as the mayor has said earlier, that they also commit to working together through the continued engagement and developing closer ties, further to growing mutually beneficial foundation that has already been established. We are talking 600 million rand investment. Shall we rise as we witness this? Thank you very much. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You may be seated. Municipal manager. As of as is in the level of October, Basa wenziwa njani? Asibe nje. Ikhali insizwa lena ukuthi hayi balifaka ucingo lontshontsho. Siyabonga. I'm requesting now Mr. Zungu. He has a special, rather prestigious item to render, just in brief. Program Director, thank you so much for permitting me to use this moment to hand over a gift of a jersey, Yamazulu Football Club, to Umntwana waPhindangene, kanye no mayor sobalisa bengicela nje
nje bangihloniphe basondele bazomela nasi isipho esiqhamuka eqembini lesizwe. Mandazi ukuthi ushayeka wayedlala ibhola. Ngicela nifollow-ke manje.
Uyayifela, ipi, uyayifela.
Masithi leli emlandweni woSuthu abalazi uSuthu bazokhumbula ukuthi alikaze laba number 2 in the era of PSL. So ukuthi kwindawo yakhe usokwalisa aligude nale strike. Bese kuthi lesi sokwalisa umeya wethu as a host, as a friend.
Usu.
Igama lokusizwa lithi John Jones, number 7.
Siyabonga, you may be seated. Ngizocela ke sisale sesithola i-closing prayer ezovela ku-Bishop MV Spear. Bese ke siyawuvala umcimbi, we will then have a branch after that. So Bishop uyena uzosiseka. Simple.
Oh, no, so past long hair. Izizwe zizakucinywa wena ongacimeliyo osihawukele wobongwe isizwe sonke emagumbini omane eziwa phambi kwakho zithi uyingcwele mntwana omkhulu magogo share.
The program director, Tian, thank you so much. Ngibingelela ngakavali ngabe ngenziphutha ngabingelela umntwana wabaphinda ngene. Sibonga kakhulu umntwana. I'm always amazed by the level of your memory. Whenever you speak, it amazes me. You call or tell by names, people by names. things which happened maybe 20 or 30 years ago. It is unbelievable. Thank you so much. Mayor was hostile. Sheng, ngiyakubingelela, thank you so much. Ngibingelela futhi umpostoli Baba uHlomo kanye no professors bese ngithi kubo bonke all protocol observed. Sengivala ngithanda ukuthi ngifunde lelizwi lenkosi lapha na Proverbs chapter 16 verse 9 elifundeka kanje. In their hearts humans plan their cause, but the Lord establishes their steps. Abantu bayaceba enhlizweni yabo amacebo, kodwa uNkulunkulu uyaphumelelisa amasu. So many things have been shared in this place. Visions have been spoken. But njengamanje ngiyanikela kulokho uNkulunkulu ukuthi uNkulunkulu makaphumelelise amacebo. Ngicela sikhuleke. Baba egameni lika Jesu Kristu ophila kuze bephakade. I thank you, my God, and I give you the praise and I worship you, Lord, and I glorify you. Sibonga Thixo wethu ukuthi ukuhlangana kule ndawo akuzange kube liphutha, wakwazi ngaphambili. Lesi sikhathi wasazi ngaphambili. Kuningi osekukhulunyiwe. Baba wethu namandla onke, amacebo amahle nembono emihle. Father, I pray ukuthi konke kuyoba impumelelo ngegama lika Jesu Kristu ophilayo. Sibonga Thixo wethu nabaholi obanikezile lo mbono. Baba wethu namandla onke nomholi umeya weZululand kanye nabo bonke asebenza kanye nabo. Siyabonga Thixo wethu ukuthi ubanikele lo mbono. Siyabonga baba wethu namandla onke nobaba bonke besizwe abakhona namhlanje. Umntwana waphinda ngene. Baba wethu namandla onke siyabonga ukuthi ubaphile impilo. Siyabonga baba wethu namandla onke nosomabhizinisi bonke abakhona. It is our prayer ukuthi Nkosi ivision abanayo mayiphumelele, nezifiso zabo zonke masiphumelele. Baba wethu namandla onke sisaphuma kule ndawo sihamba. I pray my Father ukuthi uhambo lube nempumelelo. Kungabe bikho zingozi, kungabe bikho ukugula, kungabe bikho ukuphazamiseka. Konke okufisiwe kule ndawo kusakhulunywa makwenzeke ngoba unguNkulunkulu wezinto ezinhle. Izwi lakho lithi wena unguNkulunkulu okhanya, awuyena uNkulunkulu bomnyama. Zonke izinto ezinhle zivela kuwe futhi uyayiphumelelisa. Siyabonga ke baba wethu namandla ukuthi nakho konke lokho sekuyoba impumelelo. I pray my Father ukuthi the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit will be with us as we depart in Jesus' mighty name. Amen.
Sabonga kakhulu Mageba ngomthandazo siphe wona seyubusisa ke nokudla lokho esizokudla. Ladies and gentlemen, brunch will be served and sizobizwa ke itafula ngetafula, the main table first, then sonke sizobizwa table by table, and we will now enjoy ke music as siqhubeka bese qalile umbuso, and we are 7 minutes away from midday. So now that we missed breakfast and we have 7 minutes with brunch before then, we turn this into a lunch event. So music also will come as we engage, Sinetweka, and Sazana as well. Over to African Ensemble. Siabo.
With